My stepmom stole $2.5 million from my dad, then planned his death. He left me everything, but the real inheritance was a truth changed everything. Before made it sound like I was from the Stone Age. When I was 12, she convinced James to send me to boarding school. She'd thrive with structure, she told him. What she really meant was she'd thrive without me there. I spent holidays in empty dorms while my brothers posted Instagram stories of family ski trips. James would call on Christmas morning, always rushed, always with Catherine's voice in the background reminding him about brunch reservations. I worked 3 jobs to get through college because James's checks always came with conditions. Your stepmom thinks it's important you learn responsibility, he'd say. Meanwhile, my brothers got monthly allowances that exceeded my yearly income. I graduated with honors and $52,000 in debt. My youngest brother dropped out twice and James just bought him a condo downtown. The irony was I looked exactly like James. Same dark eyes, same crooked smile, same stubborn jawline. My brothers took after her side, blonde and angular, but she spent 2 decades pretending I was the outsider. James died suddenly at 70. Heart attack during his morning run. I flew in for the funeral, sat in the back row while she sobbed dramatically in the front. My brothers flanked her like bodyguards. At the reception, she didn't speak to me once. The lawyer called me 4 days later. "We need you at the reading of the will," he said. His tone was weird, almost apologetic. "It's important you're there." I assumed I was getting James's old record collection or maybe his watch. Something small that wouldn't upset her. The conference room was cold. My stepmom sat at the head of the table in head-to-toe black, diamond earrings glittering. My brothers were checking their phones. Bored. They already knew they were splitting everything. James had told them so. The lawyer cleared his throat. "This is somewhat unusual," he began. He looked directly at me. "Your father established a trust 8 months ago. The estate, including the house, the business holdings and all liquid assets, go entirely to his daughter, Lily." I'd never heard my name sound so loud. My stepmom's head snapped up. "What?" "There are provisions for the boys," the lawyer continued. "College funds that have already been distributed, but the bulk of the estate, approximately $5.2 million, goes to Lily, along with full ownership of the company." The room erupted. My stepmom was screaming about mistakes, about lawyers being incompetent, about James not being in his right mind. My brothers were demanding to see the documents. And I just sat there frozen while the lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the table to me. "Your father left this for you," he said quietly. "To be opened privately." I waited until I was back in my hotel room. Inside was a letter in James's handwriting and a USB drive. The letter was short. "You were never the mistake I was. I let her make you feel unwanted in your own home. I let her poison your brothers against you. This doesn't fix what I did, but it's the only thing I have left to give. The USB contains everything you need. Trust no one, especially her." My hands were shaking as I plugged in the drive. It contained years of financial records, emails, and video files. The first video was dated 6 months before James died. His face filled the screen. "If you're watching this, I'm already gone," he said. "And you need to know the truth about what she did." I clicked on the next file, and that's when I realized the inheritance was the least of it. The second video started with James sitting in what looked like his office at home. He looked thinner than I remembered, his face drawn. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. "I need to start from the beginning," he said, glancing at something off camera. "Before I married her. Before you were sent away. Before everything fell apart." He took a deep breath. "Your mother and I divorced when you were 3. You know that part. What you don't know is why. I had an affair. A stupid, selfish affair that destroyed my marriage to the only woman I ever truly loved. Your mother found out when she was pregnant with you. She stayed until you were born. Tried to make it work for another 3 years. Then couldn't do it anymore. I don't blame her. I blamed myself." His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "I met your stepmom 6 months after the divorce was finalized. She worked at the firm that handled our separation. She was attentive, sympathetic. She listened to all my regrets about losing your mother. How I wished I could fix things. How guilty I felt about you growing up in a broken home." He paused, jaw clenching. "I found out 2 years ago that she orchestrated the entire thing. The affair that ended my marriage, she set it up. The woman I cheated with was her college roommate. They planned it together. My laptop screen blurred. I had to pause the video. The affair that destroyed my parents' marriage was engineered by the woman who raised me to feel like garbage. I sat there numb before forcing myself to continue. I found emails between them, James continued. Going back 26 years. Your stepmom saw me at a firm event. I was a junior partner then. But she did her research. She knew I was married, knew about your mother's family money, knew I was being groomed to take over the company, and she wanted in. He pulled out a folder. Her roommate, Sophie, was hired to work at my firm as a temp. She pursued me aggressively. I was weak and stupid and flattered. We had an affair that lasted 3 months. Your mother found photos that Sophie had left deliberately in my briefcase. My stomach turned. The breakup of my parents' marriage, the reason I grew up shuttling between homes, the foundation of every insecurity I'd ever had, was because some woman wanted my James's money. After your mother left, your stepmom showed up at my door with a casserole, said she'd heard through the office gossip. She was just being a good colleague, a friend. Within 6 months, we were dating. Within a year, engaged. He rubbed his face. She moved fast. Got pregnant with your brother almost immediately after the wedding. Then pregnant again, 14 months later. By the time I realized something was off, we had 2 kids and she'd positioned herself as the perfect wife. PTA president, charity board member, the whole act. But she hated you, Lily. From the moment we got married, she made that clear when we were alone. You reminded her that I'd loved someone before her. That there was a time when I belonged to another woman. She couldn't stand it. The boarding school. The holidays spent alone. The constant criticism. I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening. But I was a coward. I told myself you were resilient. That the distance was good for you, that she'd warm up eventually. His voice cracked. She was stealing from me the entire time. Small amounts at first from the business accounts, then larger sums once she figured out I wasn't paying attention. She has a gambling problem, a serious one. I didn't find out until 20 months ago when a casino in Atlantic City contacted me about a $375,000 line of credit she'd opened using our joint assets as collateral. I sat up straighter. I hired a forensic accountant. Quiet, private, someone she'd never know about. Turns out she'd been siphoning money for over a decade. Business accounts, personal savings, investment portfolios, sometimes $6,000 here, sometimes $55,000 there. She'd forged my signature on loans, taken out credit cards in the company name, even sold some of my mother's jewelry and pocketed the cash. The screen showed James pulling out a thick stack of papers. Total estimated theft over 16 years, $2.5 million, not including the losses from her gambling. That's separate. My head spun. No wonder James had been so stingy with my college money. He probably didn't have it. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She laughed. Said I owed her for marrying down, for raising another woman's daughter, for giving me 2 sons who'd carry on the family name. She said if I divorced her, she'd take me for everything I had left and she'd make sure everyone knew I was a deadbeat father who abandoned you. He leaned closer to the camera. That's when I started planning. I sold off assets quietly. Restructured the business. Set up the trust in your name only. I made sure everything was ironclad. She can't touch it. The boys got their college funds, that's it. Everything else is yours. But here's what you really need to know. His expression darkened. 3 weeks before I died, I told her I wanted a divorce. I'd finally found my spine. I told her I had evidence of the theft, that I'd go to the police if she didn't leave quietly. He glanced away. She said I'd regret it, that I wouldn't live to see the divorce finalized. The video cut off. I sat frozen. The next file was titled Insurance Investigation. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Part of me didn't want to know. The other part needed to know everything. I opened it. It was a report from a private investigator dated 3 weeks before James's death. The summary page made my blood run cold. Subject has made multiple internet searches on undetectable poisons, heart attack medications, and life insurance payout timelines. Subject was observed meeting with an individual identified as Dr. Michael Cross, a physician who lost his medical license in 2019 for prescription fraud. Subject exchanged cash for unknown items. Recommend immediate action. James had known. He'd known she was planning something and he documented it, but he died anyway. I clicked on the next video. James's face appeared, but this time he looked scared. If you're seeing this after my death and it's ruled natural causes, it wasn't. Look at the autopsy report. Check my medical records. I had perfect heart health. I was running marathons. There's no history of heart disease in my family. He was breathing hard. She's going to kill me. I know it. I can feel it. I've started documenting everything. What I eat, where I go, every pill I take. It's all in the spreadsheet labeled medical log on this drive. If something happens, you'll know. The video ended. I was shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. I found the medical log. It was meticulous. Every meal, every medication, every symptom logged with timestamps. The entry stopped the morning he died. The final entry read 7:14 a.m. Took usual vitamins. Felt dizzy, heart racing. This isn't right. I needed to see the autopsy report. I clicked through folders frantically until I found it. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrhythmia. Natural causes. No toxicology screen had been performed because there was no suspicion of foul play. He'd been cremated 2 days after his death. My stepmom had pushed for it, saying James wouldn't want people gawking at his body. The evidence was ash. My phone rang. It was the lawyer. Miss Lily, I'm sorry to call so late, but there's something else you should know. Your stepmother is contesting the will. She's filed an emergency motion claiming your father was mentally incapacitated when he made the trust. Can she do that? She's going to try. The hearing is in 4 days. You'll need to be there. After we hung up, I opened my laptop again. There was one more folder I hadn't looked at yet. It was labeled for when she tries to fight. Inside were more emails. These were between my stepmom and her lawyer from 6 months ago, before James even died. They discussed strategies for contesting his will, claiming diminished capacity, arguing undue influence. She'd been planning this for months. One email made me want to scream. Don't worry, her lawyer had written. Once he's gone, we'll have the daughter declared unfit. She's unstable. No relationship with the family. Hasn't been involved in his life for years. The judge will give it all to you and the boys. They'd been planning to steal my inheritance before I even knew I was getting one. I spent the next 3 days barely sleeping. I hired my own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Rodriguez who specialized in estate law and fraud. She was expensive, but James's trust had provisions for legal fees. Patricia listened to everything, watched the videos, reviewed the documents. This is attempted murder, she said flatly. You need to go to the police. With what evidence? He's already cremated. The autopsy said natural causes. The investigator's report, the medical logs, the internet searches, it's circumstantial, and she's connected. She spent 20 years schmoozing with judges and lawyers and society people. They'll protect her. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Then we hit her where it hurts. The money we prove she stole from your father. That she forged documents. That she committed fraud. We make it so toxic that contesting the will becomes impossible. The hearing was in a courthouse I'd driven past 1,000 times but never entered. My stepmom arrived in a black dress and pearls, playing the grieving widow. My brothers flanked her, both in dark suits, looking uncomfortable. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes. She'd reviewed the preliminary documents. Ms. Rodriguez, she said, you filed a counter motion alleging fraud and theft. That's a serious accusation. Patricia stood. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation proving Mrs. Catherine's stepmother embezzled over $2.5 million from the deceased's accounts over 16 years. We also have evidence suggesting foul play in his death. The room erupted. My stepmom's lawyer was objecting. My brothers were shouting. The judge was banging her gavel. Order, the judge barked. Ms. Rodriguez, these are criminal allegations. This is a civil proceeding, which is why we're filing a formal complaint with the district attorney's office this afternoon, Your Honor. But the fraud directly impacts the validity of any claim Mrs. Catherine's stepmother has to the estate. She cannot profit from her own criminal acts. The judge looked at my stepmom, who'd gone pale. Do you have proof of these allegations? Patricia pulled out a thumb drive. 16 years of bank records, forged signatures, emails discussing the theft, and testimony from a forensic accountant. Everything is documented. The hearing was postponed while the DA's office reviewed the evidence. My stepmom left without looking at me. My brothers did though. The older one, Ethan looked confused. The younger one, Jackson, looked scared. That night, Ethan called me. We hadn't spoken directly in 6 years. Is it true? He asked without preamble. Did Mom really steal from James? Yes. Silence. And the other thing about James's death? I don't know for sure, but he thought she was going to kill him. He told me in a video. More silence. Jackson and I didn't know about any of it. We thought you were just the spoiled kid who James gave everything to. That's what Mom always said. I paid for college myself. I graduated $52,000 in debt while you two got allowances and condos. I know that now. I saw the records, your tuition payments, the loans. James kept every receipt. I didn't say anything. I need to know something. Ethan said, did he love us? Or was it all just her? The question broke something in me. He loved you. You were his sons. He didn't know how to stand up to her. And by the time he figured it out, it was too late. We should have been better to you. Yeah, you should have. He hung up. 2 weeks later, the DA filed formal charges. 15 counts of fraud, 11 counts of forgery, and 7 counts of grand larceny. My stepmom was arrested at her tennis club in front of all her society friends. The news covered it. Prominent socialite charged in $1 million theft scheme. Her mugshot was everywhere. She posted bail within hours. Her lawyer issued a statement calling it a vindictive witch hunt by a bitter stepdaughter, but the evidence was damning. The forensic accountant testified. The forged signatures were analyzed. The casino confirmed her gambling debts. The private investigator provided his report on the suspicious searches and meetings. Patricia filed a separate motion to reopen the investigation into James's death. This one was harder. The detective assigned to review it was skeptical. Mr. James's father had a clean toxicology screen, he said. No signs of trauma. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes. The ME didn't screen for everything. Patricia argued there are substances that mimic heart attacks and clear the system quickly. Potassium chloride, digoxin, certain beta blockers. The deceased's medical log shows symptoms consistent with poisoning. Those symptoms could also be consistent with a heart attack. He was 70 years old, ran marathons, had perfect blood work 3 weeks before his death, and his wife had been researching undetectable poisons online. There's probable cause for further investigation. The detective promised to review it. I didn't hold my breath. The criminal trial for the fraud charges started 4 months later. I sat in the courtroom every single day. My stepmom wore designer outfits and cried delicately into tissues. Her lawyer painted her as a dedicated wife and mother who'd sacrificed everything for her family. The prosecutor, a bulldog of a woman named Helen Park, destroyed that narrative methodically. She showed the bank transfers, the forged signatures, the emails where my stepmom bragged about how much she'd gotten away with. One email to her sister read, "He's so stupid he doesn't even check the accounts. I took $80,000 last month and he didn't notice. This is almost too easy." Another to her lawyer, "Once the idiot dies, I'll have everything. The daughter gets nothing. She's not even really family." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. My stepmom's face crumpled. Her lawyer immediately filed for appeal, but the judge wasn't sympathetic. She set bail at $2.5 million. My stepmom couldn't pay it. All her assets were frozen, and the friends who'd surrounded her for years suddenly had other commitments. She spent the next 3 months in county jail waiting for sentencing. The DA's office finally agreed to reopen James's death investigation based on the new evidence. They couldn't prosecute for murder, they explained. Not without a body or toxicology results, but they could investigate. The detective interviewed the private investigator. He tracked down Dr. Michael Cross, the physician who'd lost his license. Under pressure, Cross admitted he'd sold my stepmom a bottle of liquid potassium chloride, telling her it was for gardening purposes. Potassium chloride in high doses causes cardiac arrest that's nearly impossible to distinguish from natural causes, especially if no one's looking for it. The DA couldn't charge her with murder. The evidence was circumstantial, and James's cremation had destroyed any chance of proving cause of death beyond reasonable doubt. But they could charge her with conspiracy to commit murder. The second trial was faster. The evidence was presented, the searches, the purchase, the threats. James's fear documented in his videos. My stepmom's lawyer argued it was all speculation that buying a chemical wasn't the same as using it. But the jury saw James's face in those videos. They heard the fear in his voice. They saw a woman who'd stolen millions from her husband and threatened him when he tried to leave. They convicted her on conspiracy charges. At sentencing, the judge looked at my stepmom with undisguised contempt. You married a man under false pretenses. You manipulated him for decades. You stole from him systematically. You made his daughter's life miserable, and when he finally found the courage to stand up to you, you plotted his death. My stepmom's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up her hand. Even if we can't prove you administered the substance that killed him, the evidence is clear you intended to. You researched methods. You acquired the means. You threatened him directly. She adjusted her glasses. For the fraud charges, I'm sentencing you to 13 years. For the conspiracy charges, an additional 16 years. To be served consecutively. You'll be eligible for parole in 22 years. My stepmom was 54. She'd be 76 before she could even apply for parole. She was led away in handcuffs, finally silent. Ethan and Jackson testified at the trial. They'd cooperated with the investigation, turning over their own communications with their mother. Emails where she'd asked them to lie about timelines, to say James had been sick for months, to discredit me as unstable. They'd refused. After sentencing, we met at a coffee shop near the courthouse. It was awkward. We hadn't been in the same room socially since we were kids. We're sorry, Jackson said. He was 24 now, working at a marketing firm. We believed everything she told us about you. That you were ungrateful, that you'd abandoned James, that you were only coming back for money. She was convincing, I said. That's not an excuse, Ethan added. He was 26, had started his own consulting business. We were old enough to see what was happening. We chose not to. I sipped my coffee. It was still too hot. James left you both the college funds. She can't touch those. They're in your names. We know. We're not going to contest the will, Ethan said quickly. You deserve everything. We wanted you to know we're not her. We don't want anything from you except maybe to know each other, Jackson said quietly. If you're open to it. Not as brothers necessarily, but as people who shared a really messed up family. I looked at them. They had her coloring, but I could see James in their expressions now. The same slight furrow when they were nervous. The same way of holding themselves. We can try, I said. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. I inherited everything 6 months later after all appeals were exhausted and the estate was finally settled. $5.2 million. The house, the company, everything. I sold the house immediately. I couldn't live there. Couldn't walk through rooms where she'd made me feel worthless. A developer bought it and tore it down to build condos. Good riddance. The company was harder. James had built it from nothing, and it employed 60 people who had nothing to do with the family drama. I kept it running, hired a CEO to manage day-to-day operations, and set up a profit-sharing plan for all employees. I paid off my student loans in one payment. $52,000 gone with a single check. Then I did something James would have liked. I set up a scholarship fund at my old boarding school for kids who needed financial help. The kind of help I never got. It's called the Every Kid Belongs Fund, and it pays full tuition plus living expenses for 20 students every year. I also established a foundation to help adult children of parental alienation, legal fees, therapy costs, whatever they needed to rebuild relationships or move on from toxic families. I'd lived it. I knew what it cost. Ethan, Jackson and I have coffee every month now. It's still strange. We're learning each other as adults, trying to separate who we actually are from who we were trained to be. Jackson's engaged to a guy named Chris, who's a social worker. Ethan's dating, but says he's not ready for commitment after watching what marriage did to our family. I get that. I'm in therapy twice a week, working through 2 decades of being told I didn't matter, that I was a burden, that I was the mistake that ruined everything. Some days I believe her voice instead of my own. Those days are hard, but I have James's videos. I watch them when I need to remember that I wasn't crazy, wasn't wrong, wasn't the problem. You were never the mistake, he says in the last video he made, recorded 3 days before he died. You were the best thing I ever did. I just didn't fight hard enough to prove it to you. I'm sorry, Lily. I'm so sorry. He's crying in that video. So am I every time I watch it. A year after the sentencing, I got a letter from my stepmom. She'd written it from prison. Her handwriting was shaky, unrecognizable from the perfect script she'd used for Christmas cards and party invitations. "I'm not writing to apologize," it began, "because I don't think sorry means anything at this point. I'm writing because I need you to understand why." I almost threw it away, but something made me keep reading. "I grew up poor, trailer park poor. The kind of poor where you wore the same jeans every day and kids made fun of your food stamps. I watched my mother work 3 jobs and still couldn't pay rent. I promised myself I'd never live like that. Never be that desperate. When I saw James, I saw a way out. He was kind, successful, stable, everything I'd never had. And I took it. I orchestrated it. I don't regret that part. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about security and became about control, about winning. You were evidence that I wasn't his first choice, that he'd loved someone before me. I couldn't stand it. Your brothers were mine. The house was mine. The social status was mine. But you were a reminder that I'd built my life on a lie, that I was the second wife, the replacement, the one he'd settled for. So I made you feel how I felt growing up. Unwanted. Less than. A mistake. It's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I stole the money because I was terrified. Terrified he'd leave. Terrified I'd end up back where I started. The gambling was. It was the only time I felt in control. Even when I was losing, I was the one making the choice. And your father's death. The next part was blacked out. Redacted by prison officials probably. But I could make out a few words through the ink. Regret. Too late. What have I done? The letter ended simply. I destroyed you to save myself. That's what it comes down to. I hope you find peace. I won't. I burned the letter in my fireplace that night. Watched her words curl and blacken and turn to ash just like James's body. She'd wanted me to understand her. Maybe I did, but understanding doesn't mean forgiveness. My therapist asked if the letter gave me closure. No, I said, because she still made it about her. Her poverty, her fears, her pain. She couldn't even apologize without centering herself. Do you need her apology? I thought about it. No, I needed James's, and I got it even if it came too late. 2 years after James's death, I went to visit my mom. We'd maintained a relationship over the years, but it had always been complicated. She'd remarried when I was 8, moved across the country, started a new family. I wasn't excluded exactly, but I wasn't central either. She lived in Oregon now, in a house overlooking the ocean. Her second husband was nice enough. They had a daughter, my half-sister Olivia, who was 14. Mom hugged me at the door. She'd aged well, still beautiful in that effortless way some women managed. I heard about everything, she said. The trial, the conviction, all of it. We sat on her back deck watching the waves. Why didn't you warn me? I asked her. You must have known she was involved in the affair. Mom was quiet for a long time. I suspected little things that didn't add up, but I couldn't prove it. And honestly, Lily, I was so angry at James, I didn't care. I wanted him to be miserable with her. I wanted her to make his life hell. She looked at me. I never thought about what that would mean for you. That you'd be caught in the middle of it. That she'd take her insecurities out on you. You sent me back there every summer. Every holiday. You knew she didn't like me. I thought I was doing the right thing, making sure you had a relationship with your father. I didn't realize that she was torturing me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I failed you too. I was so focused on my own hurt, my own new life, that I didn't see what was happening to you. It was the apology I'd needed from her for years. Better late than never, I guess. We talked for hours that day. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. She told me about the affair. How she'd found the photos. How she'd confronted James. And he'd confessed everything. How she'd tried to forgive him but couldn't get past the betrayal. I loved him, she said. Even after everything I loved him. But I couldn't trust him. And without trust, there's no marriage. Did you ever regret leaving? Every day for the first 5 years. Then I met Richard, and I built a new life, a good life. But I always felt guilty about you, about what my leaving cost you. Olivia came out onto the deck, shy and curious. She'd heard about me, but we'd only met a handful of times. Are you really my sister? She asked, half-sister. But yeah, Mom says you're really rich now, Olivia. Mom scolded. I laughed. It's okay. Yeah, I inherited money from my dad. What are you going to do with it? Help people. That's the plan anyway. She nodded seriously. That's cool. Mom says money can't buy happiness, but it can buy security, and security is really important. Smart kid. I stayed in Oregon for a week. Mom and I rebuilt something during that time. Not the relationship we'd lost, but a new one. Adult to adult, honest about our failures and our regrets. Before I left, she gave me a box of photos, pictures of James and her when they were young, before the affair, before everything fell apart. They looked happy. Genuinely, unquestionably happy. He loved me once, she said. And I loved him. Remember that, okay? Not everything was ruined. You came from something real. I keep those photos in my living room now. A reminder that even broken things started whole. The company James left me turned out to be more complicated than I'd expected. He'd run a commercial real estate development firm, but he'd also been quietly buying up properties in low-income neighborhoods. The files showed he'd been working on a project to create affordable housing, using the company's resources to subsidize rent for families who couldn't afford market rates. He'd never told anyone about it. Not my stepmom, not the boys, not me. It was his secret project, something he'd been planning for years. The plans were detailed. Mixed income developments, community spaces, partnerships with local organizations. He'd wanted to build something that mattered, something that helped people like my stepmom had been as a kid. The irony wasn't lost on me. I decided to finish it. Hired architects, met with community leaders, pushed through zoning approvals. The first building opened 2 years after James's death. 24 units, half market rate and half subsidized. We named it the Second Chance Building. Ethan and Jackson came to the opening. They'd both contributed to the project. Ethan handling the business planning and Jackson managing the marketing. We were learning how to work together, how to be family without all the poison our parents had fed us. At the ribbon cutting, I gave a speech. My father wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, hurt people he loved, and spent too long looking the other way while others suffered. But at the end of his life, he tried to do something good. This building is his apology, and it's my promise to keep doing better. The local news covered it. The reporter asked about the trial, about my stepmom, about whether I felt vindicated. No, I said honestly. Vindication suggests winning. Nobody won here. We all lost years. We can't get back, but we can build something new. That's what this is about. That night, Ethan, Jackson and I went to James's grave. We buried his ashes finally in a plot next to his parents'. My stepmom had fought it, wanted to keep his ashes, but the court ruled in my favor. We stood there as the sun set. 3 siblings who barely knew each other, connected by shared trauma and tentative hope. Do you think he'd be proud? Jackson asked. I think he'd be relieved, I said. That we're not making his mistakes. Ethan laughed, a short, bitter sound. Low bar. Yeah, but it's a start. 5 years after James's death, I got an email from the prison. My stepmom had requested a meeting. She'd been approved for a visitation if I agreed to come. I didn't respond for 3 weeks. My therapist asked what I wanted to do. Part of me wants to see her, I admitted, to look her in the eye and tell her she didn't break me. That I'm fine, better than fine. That I have everything she wanted and she's rotting in a cell. That's understandable. But the other part knows that's what she wants. Attention to matter. Even my hatred would feed her ego. So what does the healthiest version of you want? I thought about it. Nothing. I want to feel nothing about her. She's just someone who hurt me once. Not my villain origin story, not my nemesis. Just a sick, sad woman who made evil choices. I deleted the email. The last time I thought about her was 2 months after that. I was at a park watching Ethan's daughter, my niece Claire, play on the swings. She was 3, blonde like her grandmother, but with James's smile. Ethan had been terrified when she was born, afraid he'd mess her up the way we'd been messed up. But watching him with her, patient and present and overflowing with uncomplicated love, I could see he was nothing like the parents who raised us. I tell her I love her every day, he'd said once. Even when I'm frustrated, even when she's being difficult, I want her to never doubt it. That's what we'd all needed. Someone to fight for us. someone to choose us consistently and loudly over everything else. Claire fell off the swing and scraped her knee. Before I could move, Ethan was there, scooping her up, kissing the injury, promising it would be okay. She cried for 30 seconds, then wriggled down and ran back to play. "She's going to be fine," I said. "Yeah." Ethan watched her, his expression soft. "She will, because I'll make sure of it." I drove home that afternoon thinking about cycles, how trauma cascades through generations, how my grandmother probably damaged my stepmom, who damaged me and Ethan and Jackson, how we were all just wounded people wounding each other. Unless someone decided to stop, we stopped. It wasn't dramatic. No big confrontation, no final showdown, just a quiet decision to not pass the pain forward, to let it end with us. The foundation I'd started was helping 30 families a year now. We'd expanded services to include therapy, legal support, and job training. I hired social workers who specialized in family trauma, lawyers who worked on custody cases, therapists who understood complex PTSD. Every person we helped felt like putting a tiny crack in the cycle of abuse that had defined my childhood. Jackson got married last year. Chris was everything my stepmom would have hated. Brilliant, kind, openly gay, and from a working-class family. Jackson invited me to be in the wedding party. I said yes. At the reception, he gave a speech thanking his parents for showing him exactly what kind of marriage he didn't want. "I watched my mother manipulate, lie, and destroy," he said. "And I watched my father enable it. They taught me that love without courage is just cowardice. So, thank you to Chris for being brave enough to love me honestly. And to my sister Lily, who showed me what real strength looks like." I cried through the whole speech. Ethan pulled me aside during the dancing. "We're lucky to have you," he said. "I know we didn't earn it, but we're grateful." "You're earning it now," I told him. "That's what matters." The scholarship fund sent its first recipients to college this year. 20 kids who'd grown up in boarding schools, foster care, or broken homes. Kids who'd been told they were problems, mistakes, burdens. I met them all at an orientation dinner. They were bright, damaged, hopeful, cynical. They reminded me of myself at 18. One girl, Tasha, approached me after. She'd grown up in foster care, bounced between 12 homes before aging out of the system at 18. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know us." "Because someone should have done it for me," I said. "And they didn't. So now I'm doing it for you. Do you want us to be grateful? I want you to be successful." Grateful is optional. She studied me for a long moment. "My caseworker said you had a messed up family too. That you get it." "I get it. Does it ever stop hurting?" I could have lied, given her some inspirational speech about healing and time and resilience. Instead, I told her the truth. Sometimes for longer and longer periods, and then something will remind you, and it'll hurt again. But the hurt gets smaller, less sharp. You learn to carry it instead of letting it carry you. She nodded. "That's what I figured. But the good news is you get to build whatever life you want now. No one else's expectations, no one else's failures, just yours." That's terrifying. Yeah, but it's also freedom. I'm 34 now, 7 years since James died, since my life exploded and reassembled into something I didn't recognize. I live in a condo downtown. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. I still work managing the foundation and the company's housing projects. I date occasionally, but haven't found anyone I want to build a life with yet. My therapist says I'm gun-shy about commitment, which is probably fair. Ethan, Jackson, and I have family dinners once a month. Claire comes and now Ethan's new baby, Jack. Jackson and Chris are adopting, waiting for a placement. We're building something new. These weird sibling relationships between people who grew up as strangers. We don't talk about our stepmom much. She's just a fact of our past, like having had chickenpox or learning to ride a bike. Sometimes Jackson will mention getting a letter from her and burning it. Ethan once admitted he still has nightmares where she's standing in his house, smiling that cold smile. I don't dream about her anymore. Last month I visited James's grave again. It was his birthday. He would have been 75. I brought flowers, sat on the grass, and talked to him like he could hear me. I paid off another round of scholarships. I said 40 kids this year. The foundation is growing. Ethan's doing really well with his business. Jackson's happy, like genuinely happy, and I'm okay. Most days I'm actually okay. The wind rustled the trees. I'm still angry at you sometimes. For not protecting me. For being weak. For letting her win for so long. But I'm also grateful you did one hard thing at the end. You gave me the truth and the means to do something with it. And I traced his name on the headstone. I hope you're wherever people go when they die. I hope you found Mom and you're both young again before everything went wrong. I hope you're proud of us, of what we became despite everything. A crow landed nearby, tilted its head at me. I forgive you, I said finally. Not because you earned it, but because carrying the anger was making me tired. I sat there for another hour, just being quiet, being still. When I left, I felt lighter. Not fixed, but less heavy. The thing about trauma is it never completely disappears. It's always there. A scar that aches when it rains. But scars are proof you survived. They're evidence that something tried to break you and failed. My stepmom tried to break me. She spent 20 years calling me the mistake. Treating me like I didn't matter. Erasing me from my own family story. But here I am running a company. Funding scholarships. Building affordable housing. Choosing differently than I was taught. Breaking cycles that have run for generations. So who's the mistake now? Not me. Never me. I was loved by my mother. Loved by my father even when he couldn't show it. Loved by brothers who found their way back to me. I'm loved by the kids I'm helping. By the families living in buildings my father dreamed of. By the people who see my work and say this matters. And I love myself. Finally. Painfully. I've learned to love the kid who survived boarding school alone. The teenager who worked 3 jobs. The young woman who graduated with honors and mountains of debt. The daughter who sat in the back row at her father's funeral. I'm not the mistake. I'm the triumph. My stepmom is spending 27 years in prison, which means she'll die there probably. She's been denied parole twice already. Too manipulative. The board said no remorse, no rehabilitation. Ethan told me she still writes letters to him, to Jackson, to her old friends, blaming me for destroying the family, claiming she's innocent, insisting James was mentally ill and I took advantage. No one responds. We've all moved on. Last week a girl from the scholarship program stopped by my office. Her name was Emily, and she'd graduated last year with a degree in social work. She'd gotten a job at a nonprofit helping kids in foster care. I wanted you to know, she said, that I used your story in an interview. They asked why I wanted this job. I told them I wanted to be for other kids what you were for me. Someone who saw us as valuable, not broken. My throat tightened. You were always valuable. I just helped you see it. That's what I mean though. You saw it first before we could. That's the gift. After she left, I stood at my window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there were more kids who felt like mistakes, more families falling apart, more people learning that the ones who were supposed to protect them were actually the threat. I couldn't save all of them, but I could save some. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it has to be enough. I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan and Jackson. Dinner this weekend. My place. I'll cook. Ethan. Only if you don't burn the pasta again. Jackson. Bringing wine and Chris's dessert. He's offended by your baking. I laughed. We were becoming what we'd never been allowed to be. Siblings who actually liked each other. My phone buzzed again. An email from the foundation director. Another applicant accepted into the program. Her name was Sarah. She'd grown up being told she was stupid, worthless, a burden on her single mother. Her essay ended with, I don't want to be what they said I was. I want to be what I choose to become. Yeah, I understood that. I approved her application and added a note. Welcome to the family. Because that's what we were building here. Not a biological family, not a legal one, but a chosen family of people who'd survived being told they were mistakes and decided to prove everyone wrong. My dad's will said I inherited $5.2 million in a company. What I actually inherited was a choice. I could be bitter, angry, broken, or I could take the pain I'd been given and transform it into something that helped others. I chose transformation. Every scholarship I fund, every affordable housing unit we build, every therapy session we pay for, every legal fee we cover for a kid fighting for custody of a younger sibling, it's all transformation. Turning cruelty into kindness, turning rejection into acceptance. Turning you don't belong into there's room for you here. My stepmom spent 20 years making me feel worthless. I'm spending the rest of my life proving worth isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice, kindness by kindness. And I'm building something she could never touch or take or destroy. I'm building myself. That night, I made dinner for Ethan, Jackson, Chris, and Claire. We ate pasta that was only slightly burned, drank wine, and laughed at old stories that used to hurt, but now just felt distant. Claire asked me to tell her about her grandpa, not my stepmom, who she'd been told was in prison, but didn't really understand. Her grandfather. He was complicated, I said, lifting her onto my lap. He made mistakes, big ones. But at the end, he tried to make things right. He left us each other. Is that a good present? She asked. Ethan reached over and ruffled her hair. Yeah, sweetheart, that's the best present. We stayed up late, these 3 siblings and our chosen family, building something new in the ruins of what we'd been given. And somewhere in a prison 3 states away, my stepmom sat in a cell, probably still insisting she'd done nothing wrong. Let her. I had everything she'd wanted and more. I had peace. I had family. I had purpose. And I had myself. Turns out that was everything that mattered.